Or a beautiful shot of Capitol Hill
You
this
know,
morning
it
in
really
Washington, D.C.
wasn't so beautiful on January the 6th.
No, it wasn't.
And for Kevin, it wasn't beautiful in the days following.
That's the big political story of the morning.
A lot of cartwheeling and somersaulting going around.
Well, taking lying to a new level. Just
hard to really say that in the age of Trump.
Can't stop lying.
But anyway.
MSNBC has obtained new audio of House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy saying he would urge Donald Trump to resign after the January 6th Capitol attack. The remarks were revealed by New York Times reporters Jonathan Martin and Alex Burns for an upcoming book entitled This Will Not Pass: Trump, Biden, and the Battle for America's Future. According to Martin and Burns, McCarthy told a group of Republican leaders, quote, "I've had it with this guy." The reporters write this: the Democrats were driving hard at an impeachment resolution, Mr. McCarthy said, and they would have the votes to pass it. Now he planned to call Mr. Trump and tell him it was time for him to go. What he did is unacceptable. Nobody can defend that, and nobody should defend it. He told the House Republican leadership team. The New York Times stated in its original reporting that it had audio of the Republican leader's remarks, but McCarthy still denied it, calling the report, quote, totally false and wrong. NBC News also reached out for comment, asking if McCarthy said he would push Trump to resign. A spokesman again denied McCarthy said it. Then, last night, the reporters provided this audio to MSNBC.
Liz, you on the phone?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Kevin. I guess there's a question. When we were talking about the 25th Amendment resolution,
Yeah.
and you asked if what happens if it gets there after he's gone. Is there any chance? Are you hearing that he might resign? Is there any reason to think that might happen?
I've had some few discussions. My gut tells me no. I'm seriously thinking of having that conversation with him tonight. I haven't talked to him in a couple days. From what I know of him, I mean, you guys all know him too. Do you think he'd ever back away? But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to call him. This is what I think. No, it'll pass the House. I think there's a chance it'll pass the Senate even when he's gone. And I think there's a lot of different ramifications for that. Now, I haven't had a discussion with the Dems that if he did resign, would it not happen? Now, this is one personal fear I have. I do not want to get into any conversations about Pence party or anything like that. I mean, the only discussion I would have with him is that I think this will pass, and it would be my recommendation we should resign. I mean, that would be my take, but I don't think he would take it, but I don't know.
NBC's reached out to McCarthy's office of comment after the audio was released, but heard nothing. Let's bring in the host and executive producer of The Circus on Showtime, MSNBC National Affairs analyst John Heilemann, and White House editor for Politico, Sam Stein. It's great to have both of you in here. It is remarkable listening to that, and it's remarkable that yet again here we have somebody in Trump's Republican Party, even when they're talking about getting rid of Donald Trump, that just lies through their teeth. Kevin McCarthy denies, his people deny that he ever said this, calls reporters liars. He's then provided a transcript, denies it. Then the audio tape comes out proving yet again, John Heilemann, that he's a liar. And this is the same exact thing that happened when that 2016 tape came out that said that where Kevin McCarthy was telling other Republican leaders that Donald Trump was on Putin's payroll and said, swear to God, I think he's paying up. He denied it. He was shown a transcript. He said the transcript is fake news. And then when they played the tape, he said, oh, he was just joking. This doesn't sound like a joke. This sounds like a man who will lie through his teeth and do anything to be Speaker of the House. The question, John Heilemann, is that now endangered because of this tape?
Morning, guys. Well, is it in danger, Joe? I think it's definitely in danger. I think, there's no question. I'm in South Florida right now, probably not very far I can't measure the number of miles from here where I'm sitting in Miami to Mar-a-Lago, but whatever it is, that's where the future of Kevin McCarthy lies now, is in Donald Trump and what his reaction to this is going to be. We had no idea what the private conversations of Trump and McCarthy have been in the last 12 hours, in the last 24 hours, in the week before that, or even really all the way back to January 7th of 2021. So I mean, Trump is not going to punish McCarthy for lying in the way you're saying, Joe, right? I mean, there's no bigger liar in the history of the world than Donald Trump. And so that's not going to be the standard. The standard's going to be what, does Trump feel as though he's been betrayed by McCarthy? And that question is I think what the whole future of McCarthy's speakership rests on. You remember, to win the speakership vote, you got to get a majority of the House. So the number of votes that McCarthy needs will be an awful lot of the Republican Party. No Democrat's going to vote for him for Speaker. And so it won't take, depending on how big the Republican majority is in the House, assuming they get one, there will be a relatively narrow margin. And if Trump were to indicate that he doesn't want McCarthy to be Speaker of the House, there are enough Trump loyalists in the House that he'd be done. So McCarthy's now got however many weeks between now and the midterms to make it up to Trump, however offended Trump is. And I think you're going to get to see Kevin McCarthy doing some extraordinary bowing and scraping and kneeling and subjugating and putting himself at the knee of Trump over the course of these weeks, and even more than he already has, to make sure that Trump doesn't give the party the high sign and basically kill his future.
It's hard for me to see Trump not doing that, Willie, when you look at the fact that we have, of course, this audio tape now where he's scheming with Liz Cheney to get Donald Trump out of the White House and get him to resign. We've got him on the floor where he's blaming January the 6th on Donald Trump. We have him talking to other members after January the 6th, saying that he screamed and yelled at Donald Trump when Trump suggested that it wasn't his people there that were rioting. We have him saying that Donald Trump is on Putin's payroll. That's on audio tape as well. Yeah, Willie, I think this may be the final straw, again, for a guy who just never learned the lesson. You can't bow and scrape to Donald Trump enough. He will end up throwing you under the bus at the end, no matter what.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Donald Trump, by the way, uncharacteristically quiet the last 2 days as all this has been out in the public. We'll see if he speaks out about Kevin McCarthy this morning in the tapes. On the other hand, he knows that Kevin McCarthy will always be his lapdog. So if he runs for president again, he wants Kevin McCarthy perhaps to be Speaker. So maybe he doesn't go as hard as you might think. And Sam Stein, what an extraordinary snapshot. That was on January 10th. That phone call that we just listened to 4 days after the attack on the Capitol. You had Liz Cheney and Kevin McCarthy on the same page, that this was a terrible thing, that something had to be done about it, that Kevin McCarthy was going to ask Trump to resign. What happened from there? Kevin McCarthy has now totally changed his tune. He did very quickly. It was at Mar-a-Lago a few weeks ago. And, as a matter of fact, trying to run Liz Cheney out of the party. He's now supporting a challenger to Liz Cheney in Wyoming in her race. He has made Liz Cheney a pariah, and yet, Sam, he completely agreed with her in real time.
Not only that, there's like a few little gems that are sprinkled on that recording. If you notice the first line, it reveals that they had a separate conversation earlier in which they were talking about using the 25th Amendment to get Trump out. So that's now revealed. I'd love to hear a recording of that phone call, too, if one exists. Secondly, he talks about making sure that Mike Pence doesn't retroactively pardon Trump, which means that he was thinking ahead to the possibility of trying to make sure that whatever punishment they gave to Trump was permanent. So, it's one thing to say, yeah, Kevin McCarthy wanted to call Donald Trump and push him out of office. It's deeper than that. He was scheming of ways to do it, not just by having a phone call with him. Of course, that's all passed now. Within a couple weeks, he was at Mar-a-Lago begging for forgiveness. And this is why I somewhat disagree. I think, for Trump, it's not the past. It may matter, may irritate him, but I think he knows that McCarthy is subjugated, that he is a loyalist at this point in time. And I think for that reason alone, I think Trump ends up forgiving him for this and doesn't interfere with him if he wants to become Speaker should Republicans win back the majority in the midterms.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by this tape. Can we play this again, TJ? I know a lot of our viewers probably heard it the first time and want to hear it again just to digest it. We have a senior citizen that watches the show a good bit in the Palm Beach area.
Oh.
He might want to hear it again too. Can we play it?
Liz, you on the phone?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Kevin. I guess there's a question. When we were talking about the 25th Amendment resolution,
Yeah.
and you asked if what happens if it gets there after he's gone. Is there any chance? Are you hearing that he might resign? Is there any reason to think that might happen?
I've had some few discussions. My gut tells me no. I'm seriously thinking of having that conversation with him tonight. I haven't talked to him in a couple days. From what I know of him, I mean, you guys all know him too. Do you think he'd ever back away? But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to call him. This is what I think. No, it'll pass the House. I think there's a chance it'll pass the Senate even when he's gone. And I think there's a lot of different ramifications for that. Now, I haven't had a discussion with the Dems that if he did resign, would it not happen? Now, this is one personal fear I have. I do not want to get into any conversations about Pence party, anything like that. I mean, the only discussion I would have with him is that I think this will pass, and it would be my recommendation we should resign. I mean, that would be my take, but I don't think he would take it, but I don't know.
My recommendation, he should resign.